And bring this together and also see whether there is a way forward to create a springboard from this event, and also because of the spirit of what we've heard, not just in this room, but the realities of what is developing. Is this a Renaissance moment of some kind now for the water challenge? Let me introduce Professor Ian Goldin, who is from Oxford University. For 10 years, he was the founding director of the extraordinary Martin School, bringing together multiple disciplines within the University of Oxford. Well-funded, he is on sabbatical at the moment, but has been a prolific writer, both within the school and also in whatever he calls his spare time for the pursuits of development, the butterfly defect. He published 2 books alone last year. What about whether this is a Renaissance moment? And a reminder, we will bring other things together as well, including with the concluding music from a great cellist. Ian Goldin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me. Let me race through some of the mega trends that will shape our time and just help us as we leave here think about this extraordinary moment we're in with a sense of optimism. And of course, it is an optimism that unites us, that has brought down walls around the world over the last 30 years. It's the optimism of connectivity, which is both the source of the huge potential to deal with this issue, but also, of course, the reason why that issue is ever more complex. It's transformed the world in fundamental ways. It transformed my life. I thought I would never go back to South Africa in my lifetime, and then became Nelson Mandela's economic advisor and ran the State Regional Bank. Something that happened because of cascading changes at the other side of the world. 65 countries became democratic. And in that process, we saw how change can transcend national borders, how ideas matter more than anything, and how no wall can be high enough to stop them. This process continues, and the pace of change is accelerating. But we learned from the Arab Spring another fundamental lesson, which of that of reversals, the shocks, the roller coaster ride and surprises. The only certainty is the uncertainty. And with that, of course, nothing can be taken for granted. That's why we need to engage more actively. That's why sitting back is not an option, because if we do sit back, it will come off the rails. Because the walls have come down, there are 2 billion people in the world over the last 30 years. Ideas have traveled, leading people to live longer, healthier lives in more places. Simple ideas like smoking kills you, very complicated ideas like those embedded in new vaccines, like those embedded in new water, in clean water. And with that, of course, a fundamental new transformation, ideas not only being physical, but virtual as well in their connectivity. So we move from a world of only 500 million people sharing ideas to a world of 6 billion today sharing ideas. And in this escalation of change, because ideas are the generator of history, ideas are what change the world, ideas are what destroy the world and build the world. And that's why we need to have better ideas. When I first went to China in 1982, there were 78 people doing doctoral degrees. This year, there are 350,000. The level of education and idea generation is different, and that's why today is the slowest day you'll know for the rest of your lives. The engines of innovation are being turned down. Creativity is being set alight around the world in new, unprecedented ways. And with that, we need to think very deeply about how this will manifest itself. What ways will this new connectivity, where 80% of the world is now connected in various ways, change us? Well, when we look at the long sweep of history, the last 2,000 years, we see this extraordinary story. We see population growth never being more rapid, and we see income growth more rapid still, exponential, the right-hand axis, whereas population growth, arithmetic, the left. And with that, the most successful story of development the world has ever known. Infant mortality going down, life expectancy going up, and average life improvements of 20 years around the planet. It took from the Stone Age to the 1970s to achieve that. The number of people illiterate going down by 70%, despite the world's population going up by 2 billion. in a world of 5 billion, there were 3 billion illiterate. Today, they're less than 1 billion. And the number of desperately poor people going down by 300 million despite this population growth. So we live in a new time, a time unprecedented in history, a time which is different and a time that gives us cause for optimism. It gives us the optimism that we can tackle water and other challenges. And we've heard from many inspiring people today about how this may be achieved. It's a time like a time that Rome experienced 500 years ago. Right here is where the Renaissance happened. It fundamentally transformed the way the world was understood. It led from a round world with dragons on the edge to Mercator's projection. It led to a world where the sun revolved around us to us revolving around it. Copernicus and others. And of course, it led to fundamental other revolutions. Driven by new information technologies, then it was the Gutenberg press, today it's the internet and World Wide Web. Before the press, only the church, monks, could read and write in Latin, and a very, very small sample, less than 1% of the European population had information, and the church had a very strong power over knowledge. And suddenly, with this, 250 million books and many billions of political pamphlets were printed in a 50-year period 500 years ago. And that's why ideas traveled. That's why the world was shaken up, and that's what's happening today. Of course, Florence was the epicenter of this. But it ended in tears, the bonfire of the vanities, jihadists, extremists, Savonarola and his disciples taking over Florence and deposing the Medicis, shattering and fragmenting the church, leading to an attack on intellectuals, new religions being formed, and of course then the Inquisitions and the attack on experts and intellectuals, which echo those of today. It was a terrifying time. It was a time when progress was set back and when the sure things that people knew about were questioned. These voyages of discovery in intellectual and in physical terms led to new worlds that were totally unexpected. And of course we know that they led to the death of most Native Americans through the pandemics that were spread. These unintended consequences of change. And that's the subject of this book, Age of Discovery. What do I worry about in our period of change? While the walls have gone down between societies, they're going up in all societies. Inequalities are growing in virtually all countries of the world. And this is because of globalization. When things change more rapidly, people get left behind more quickly. And we forget that at our peril. They get angry if they are not part of change. And when things connect, not only good things connect, terrible things connect too. The butterfly defect of globalization is contagion, cascading financial crises, and the unintended consequences of good things becoming bad. We all climb the energy curve and we get climate change. We all consume more water and we run out of water and destroy it. We all take antibiotics, or more and more people do, and you get antibiotic resistance. When individuals making rational decisions connect and they are more effective at connecting and wealthier, their individual actions get overwhelmed. The commons problems become bigger and bigger. So running through the mega trends, we see life expectancy increasing, we see infant mortality declining and fertility declining dramatically. And over half the countries in the world are already below replacement level. We see population stabilizing in all regions of the world except Africa, and world population stabilizing at around 10 billion. Median ages doubling everywhere in the world except Africa over this period of time. And so we need to remove from mental maps ideas of population pyramids and put in place these shapes. This is Italy, where we are today. The elderly overwhelming the young, and many details, not least the gender inequities that come from this. This is the proof women are wiser than men. They live longer, although they're born to live to the same age. They don't make as many stupid decisions. They don't smoke as much. They don't drink as much. They don't stick as many knives into each other. And they live longer in all countries of the world. But the opposite happening at the bottom. Many more boys than girls being born. And that is another dimension of this going forward. So growing gender imbalances. What countries do with immigration is of vital significance. Over half the Children being born in the US today are first and second generation immigrant parents. This was done before Trump. Migration is going to be of fundamental significance to all countries in the world. It always has been. Migrants are exceptional people. Migrants shaped our current lives, and they will determine our destiny. And the sooner we realize that, the better. The economic prospects of emerging markets are much brighter than those of the advanced economies. They're growing and will continue to grow at 3 to 5 times the rates. That means that they are increasingly the engine of change economically around the world. They're also the stabilizers of growth. They're accounting for a bigger and bigger share of global growth, and they are more engines of growth. And that means average global growth rates will rise and be more stable over this because the old advanced economies become less and less significant. Many emerging markets rising to the per capita income levels of the old advanced economies and, of course, overtaking them. And with that, their consumption patterns changing in fundamental ways, leading to major questions about where the resources are going to come from. Increasingly an emerging market question. But this is just current emerging markets' contributions to growth in grey. And here you see the different shades of consumption. Everything in orange and lime is Asia. The dark blue, the US, and light blue, Europe. And you just see how insignificant the US and Europe are becoming in terms of global consumption shares over the next 30 years or so. So this is a story of change. This is a story of where change is happening and who is changing, with the 3.5 to 4 billion new middle-class consumers around the world, the red being Asia. But is there enough resource? Can the planet do this? I'm going to come back to that in a minute. The technological revolutions are as fundamental as the demographic and economic. And what we see in this is, of course, we can't predict the future. We don't know what is going to replace the things that we know aren't cool anymore. Those obviously aren't. One of these devices replacing all of them. But this is a pretty sure story, and that is of Moore's law, the doubling of processing speed for about the same price about every 18 months for the next 20 years. So we get 1 million times the power for the same price, and that changes everything. This is from my nanomedicine lab, the development of the molecular structure of this is a needle going through an individual cancer stem cell, releasing a drug into it. This is from my stem cell lab. This is an individual heart cell taken from the lab technician's skin, the ability to reprocess into any cell group. And of course now, a really fundamental thing, the ability to genetically engineer in vitro, in fetus, the way that we are. So really fundamental questions that we're not grappling with. The price of all of this going down exponentially, and with that, good and bad things that happen at increasing speed. What we must learn from all crises, not least the banking crisis, is the asymmetry that's growing. Individuals have an ability to bring down the global financial system, and increasingly they will change many other things. We enter a move of a world where individuals have more power than many nation states. The idea of cascading risk is not new. We know in England that a single rat coming off a ship might have led to the death of up to half the English population. But what's new is the speed and scale of change. So the swine flu starting in Mexico City is in 160 countries in 30 days, and we've mapped that against airline traffic and shown it exactly replicates it. So the super spreaders of the goods of globalization are also the super spreaders of the bads. And as we move into a world which is hyper interconnected, this dependency on each other grows and grows. What our neighbors do, whether they're here or the other side of the world, matters more and more. And in this process, of course, as we have a new nervous system, the fiber optic one, which connects us all instantaneously, dependency and trust becomes more and more significant. The trust that people won't empty our bank account or open our front door lock or control our vehicle-to-vehicle communication is growing every day. And with that, of course, how these machines will take our jobs. So with that, how our attitudes to technologies change will be of fundamental significance. Our handoff between man and machine, the interconnectedness of this to the planet and, of course, to ourselves. The commons issues grow and grow, And unless we are able to develop new attitudes to each other and to nature, this becomes unsustainable. We know that rational... This is the... Can you just turn the volume down? This is the tuna market in Tokyo, with this tuna being sold for €1 million for one tuna. This is the market's response to the scarcity of a natural resource. The price goes up. Of course, the tuna don't know how much they're worth. They don't mate more. We saw from our astronaut friend the Aral Sea from above, and this is it from below now. And with climate change, we have this dramatically revealed. So how we climb the energy curve, how we ensure that Africa is not devastated, and this is the IPCC projections of rainfall change in Africa by climate change, how we ensure that the agricultural systems of Africa can be resilient is absolutely central to this. The problem with water is either there's too much, and many parts of Africa have been devastated by floods as other parts of the world, or there's too little, and we know that story dramatically. Or it's too dirty, and often all of these within a year or less. And so how one engages in this on a multifaceted story with climate change, with food and the water and energy nexus is absolutely a multidisciplinary, complex problem. Now, the existing institutions, with all due respect to my colleagues at the World Bank, I was the head of policy and vice president at the World Bank and responsible for part of the water thing, I believe are only a very small part of the solution. They are major actors, but they are not scaled to the scale of this challenge, and they're not being given the power by their national governments and shareholders to the scale. Small changes in shareholding, in power relationships, rearranging the furniture, and I don't think Trump's even picking up the sofa. So we'd like individual actors in cabins on a ship, no captain on planet Earth. And in this challenge, again, we see the success story of globalization. The world can no longer be controlled by 12 white men in a room shaping the world order, and that's progress. It's one of the very good things that's happened. New power shifts are meaning that the old order can no longer run the world, and of course that's in transition. The best of the institutions, like the IMF, were simply overwhelmed by the complexity of the change. They didn't understand the scale of systemic integration. There were major governance failings at the national and global level. They didn't understand the technologies. They didn't understand the short-termism and couldn't counter it. And most crucially, the problem was not too little data. It was too much data and too few values. Wisdom and values are absolutely central to this. And if you try and understand why people are rebelling against globalization, it's because they're being left behind and feel the system's values are not theirs. They're not shared values. They're values which are leaving people behind, and I would add, leaving the planet behind. And so this attack on authority, this attack on experts, is an attack on a system which didn't have the right priorities, on a system which failed to see that we are not simply connected, but we entangled. And this is, of course, the greatest error of Brexit and protectionism. The idea of connectivity implies that you can disconnect, but when you're entangled, you cannot. Our fates are interwoven with each other, and there's no way that what happens in another place does not affect us. So we need to understand this complex integrated system and stop it falling apart. How to be connected and resilient to this connectivity is the greatest challenge, and how to embrace this technology while keeping what is essentially human, which is our values, our creativity, and our ability to make judgments. If we can do that, we've learned from the Renaissance. We've learned the lessons that our Renaissance forefathers failed to learn. And in water, this comes together in the most extraordinary ways, because there is this right to water that's been talked about, and how we manifest that, and how we ensure that we are able to add to this Renaissance watershed moment that is the title of this conference. Are we able to learn how we can each add an individual drop of change to create an ocean of change? That is the challenge we all ask. I've taken 18.30 seconds for a 20-minute session. So, Chair, I give you back a minute and a half and hope we can all rock on to a very happy old age. Thank you.